No one wanted to bid on the starving Indian girl with hollow eyes and torn feet, until an Apache leader walked through the crowd, got the rope with his blade, and dared every man there to stop him. Copper Falls, New Mexico Territory, summer of 1884. The sun beat down on the town square like a hammer striking an anvil, merciless and unforgiving. Heat shimmered off the hard-packed earth, turning the air thick and difficult to breathe. Dust devils spiraled between wooden buildings, carrying with them the scent of horse manure, tobacco spit, and desperation. Along the eastern edge of the square stood a raised platform, constructed from weathered pine boards, splintered and sun-bleached, where the territory's unwanted were displayed like livestock at market. On that platform, barely able to stand, was Talassi Morningdew. She was 19 years old, though hunger and hardship had carved years into her face that did not belong there. Her dress, once white cotton, now hung in tatters around her thin frame, stained with dirt, blood, and the evidence of a journey no one should have to make. Her feet were bare and cut, wrapped crudely in strips of fabric that had long since soaked through with red. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope, the fibers digging into skin already raw and infected. But it was her eyes that told the real story, dark and deep. They stared forward with a kind of emptiness that came not from weakness, but from having seen too much. Around her neck hung a wooden sign, painted in crude black letters that read, "Indian Girl. Healthy enough, good for kitchen work, starting bid 20 cents. The crowd that gathered was neither large nor enthusiastic. Men leaned against posts, chewing tobacco, and squinting up at her with the same interest they might show a lame horse. A few women stood at the back, fanning themselves with folded newspapers, whispering behind gloved hands. Children ran between legs, laughing and oblivious, while dogs panted in whatever shade they could find. The auctioneer was a pot-bellied man named Clarence Hobbs, wearing a vest that strained against its buttons and a hat 2 sizes too small for his sweating head. He stood beside Talassi with a wooden cane in one hand, which he used more for pointing than walking. His voice carried across the square with the practiced boom of a man who had sold everything from mules to mining claims. All right, settle down, folks. We got ourselves a prime opportunity here today. This here girl, she's Indian stock, Navajo, they tell me, though I can't say for certain. What I can say is she speaks English, knows her way around a cooking fire, and won't give you no trouble. She's quiet as a church mouse and twice as useful. Now I know what you're thinking. She looks a little worn, but that's just road dust. Feed her up a week or two and she'll be good as new. Strong back, young enough to last you years. Hell, you could do worse for 20 cents. No one moved. Hobbs frowned and tapped his cane against the platform. Come on now, don't be shy. 20 cents is cheaper than a bottle of whiskey, and she'll last a damn sight longer. Any takers? Anyone at all? A man near the front, missing 2 fingers on his left hand, spat a stream of brown juice into the dirt. She sick? She looks sick. She ain't sick, Hobbs snapped. Just hungry. That ain't contagious last I checked. What about the feet? Another voice called out. Looks like she can't even walk proper. Feet heal, Hobbs said, irritation creeping into his tone. Rope burns heal. Everything heals, if you give it time. Now, are we going to stand here debating medicine, or are we going to do business? Silence. Talassi did not look at any of them. She kept her gaze fixed on a spot just above the crowd, somewhere in the distance where the mountains rose blue and hazy against the sky. She had learned long ago that looking at them only made it worse. If she looked, she might see pity, and pity was harder to bear than hatred. If she looked, she might see hunger of a different kind, the kind that made her skin crawl and her stomach turn. So she looked at the mountains instead and thought of her mother. Her mother had loved the mountains. She used to take Talassi up into the high country when she was small, teaching her the names of plants, showing her which roots could heal and which berries would kill. Her mother had known the land the way other people knew their own children, every curve and shadow, every secret spring and hidden trail. She had been a healer, respected by her people, sought after even by the white settlers when their own doctors failed them. Then the soldiers came. Talassi closed her eyes briefly. pushing the memory down into the dark place where she kept all the things too sharp to touch. When she opened them again, Hobbs was still talking. 15 cents then. Come on, I'm practically giving her away. 15 cents and she's yours, no questions asked. You can put her to work, teach her a trade, hell, marry her off to some ranch hand if you want. I don't care what you do with her, but I got orders to move her by sundown, and I intend to do just that. A woman's voice, high and pinched, cut through the murmur. I wouldn't take her if you paid me. Indians bring bad luck. Everyone knows that. That's superstition, Martha, Hobbs said, though his smile had grown strained. This is business. Business is knowing when something ain't worth the trouble, the woman replied. And that girl is trouble. Look at her. She's half dead already. You take her home and she'll die in your kitchen, then what? You got a corpse on your hands and the law asking questions. No thank you. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Hobbs's face reddened. 10 cents. Final offer. 10 cents and I'll throw in a blanket. Can't say fairer than that. Still nothing. The sun climbed higher. Delassie's legs trembled beneath her, threatening to give out. Her mouth was dry as sand, her tongue thick and useless. She had not eaten in 3 days, had not drunk more than a few sips of brackish water from a canteen one of the guards had grudgingly offered. Her vision swam at the edges, dark spots blooming and fading like strange flowers. She thought about letting go, about simply falling forward and letting the earth catch her. Maybe that would be easier. Maybe that would be better than whatever came next. Then the wind changed. It came from the west, carrying with it the scent of sage and rain that had not yet fallen. It stirred the dust and rattled the tin signs hanging from shop fronts. It moved through the crowd like a living thing, and people turned, squinting against the sudden gust. That was when he appeared. At first he was just a shape at the far end of the square, a figure on horseback emerging from the wavering heat. But as he drew closer, details sharpened. He rode a paint horse, black and white, that moved with the easy confidence of an animal that had never known fear. The rider sat straight-backed, one hand loose on the reins, the other resting on his thigh. He wore dark trousers and a shirt the color of rust, open at the throat. His hair was long and black, tied back with a strip of leather. Across his chest, 2 bandoliers crossed, though the loops were empty of bullets. At his hip hung a knife in a worn sheath. The crowd parted without being asked. Whispers started immediately, spreading like fire through dry grass. That's him. It can't be. I'm telling you it is. Nakoa Steelhand. The name hung in the air like smoke. Nakoa Steelhand. Apache warrior. Rebel leader. The man who had fought the cavalry to a standstill in the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. The man who had freed 24 captives from a military transport and vanished into the desert like a ghost. The man the territory had put a price on, $500, dead or alive, and he had just ridden into Copper Falls in broad daylight. Hobbs's face went pale. His hand, still clutching the cane, began to shake. Several men in the crowd reached instinctively for weapons they were not wearing, having checked them at the saloon as town ordinance required. The sheriff, a lean man with a drooping mustache, stood frozen by the jailhouse door, hand hovering near his holster. Nakoa dismounted in one smooth motion. His boots hit the ground without sound. He walked toward the platform, and the crowd continued to part, people stumbling over themselves to get out of his way. His face was unreadable, all hard planes and sharp angles, but his eyes were alive with something that might have been anger, or might have been something else entirely. He stopped at the base of the platform and looked up at Delassie. For the first time since the auction began, she looked back. Their eyes met and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, though they had never seen each other before. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe it was just one human being seeing another, truly seeing them, for the first time in a very long while. Nakoa turned his gaze to Hobbs. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried. How much? Hobbs' mouth opened and closed like a fish. The bid is 10 cents, but I will give you nothing, Nakoa said. His hand moved to the knife at his hip. Because she is not yours to sell. Now hold on, Hobbs stammered, taking a step back. "This is legal. I got papers. The army gave her to me, said I could—" "The army does not own her either," Nakoa said. He drew the knife and several people gasped. The blade was long and curved, the metal so polished it reflected the sun like water. "No one owns her." He stepped onto the platform. "Sheriff!" Hobbs yelped. "Sheriff, do something!" But the sheriff did not move. He stood there, hands still on his holster, weighing options. $500 was a lot of money, but Nakoa Steelhand was also the kind of man who did not die easy. And this was a crowded square, with women and children present. Whatever happened next, people would remember. People would talk. The sheriff let his hand drop. Nakoa walked to Talasi. She did not flinch, did not move. Up close, she could see the scars on his hands, the calluses, the lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into sun and wind. He smelled of leather and smoke and something else. Something like wild sage after rain. He raised the knife and cut the rope binding her wrists. The strands fell away, and Talasi's hands dropped to her sides. Blood rushed back into her fingers, bringing with it a pain so sharp she nearly cried out. But she bit down on her lip and stayed silent. Nakoa sheathed his knife and removed the sign from around her neck. He looked at it for a moment, at the ugly words painted there, then tossed it into the dirt. He turned back to the crowd. "This woman is free," he said. His voice was not loud, but every person in that square heard it. "She will leave with me. Anyone who tries to stop us will answer to me. Anyone who follows us will not see another sunrise. Do you understand?" No one spoke. "I asked if you understand," Nakoa repeated. A few heads nodded. Others looked away. Nakoa turned to Talasi and offered his hand. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though in truth she was not certain. "Then walk with me." She placed her hand in his. His palm was warm and rough, and his grip was gentle but firm. Together they stepped down from the platform. The crowd parted again, wider this time, people pressing themselves against buildings and wagons to let them pass. Nakoa led her to his horse. He helped her up first, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, holding her steady. She could feel the strength in him, the solid presence of someone who had survived things most people only heard about in stories. He turned the horse. "Wait," Hobbs called out, finding his voice at last. "You can't just take her. That's theft. That's—" Nakoa looked back over his shoulder. "It is justice," he said. Then he touched his heels to the horse's flanks, and they rode out of Copper Falls at a walk, unhurried, as if they had all the time in the world. Behind them, the crowd stood silent, watching until they disappeared into the shimmering heat. And in the mountains beyond, thunder rumbled, promising rain. They rode for hours without speaking. The horse carried them north through terrain that shifted from desert scrub to rocky hills, following paths that seemed invisible to anyone who did not know where to look. Nakoa guided the animal with subtle shifts of weight and pressure, rarely using the reins. Talasi sat in front of him, her body swaying with the rhythm of the horse's gait, her hands gripping the saddle horn to keep herself upright. Every muscle in her body screamed with exhaustion, but she refused to lean back against him, refused to show any more weakness than she already had. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Shadows stretched long across the land, and the heat that had been suffocating during the day gave way to a cooling breeze. Talasi's vision blurred at the edges. She blinked hard, trying to focus, trying to stay conscious. Her body wanted to shut down, to surrender to the darkness that kept pulling at her, but she fought it. She had survived too much to fall now. Nakoa must have felt her wavering because his arm tightened slightly around her waist. "Not much farther," he said. His voice was low, meant only for her. "Hold on a little longer." She nodded, not trusting her voice. They entered a narrow canyon where the walls rose steep and red on either side, carved by centuries of wind and water into strange, beautiful shapes. The path wound deeper into the rock, growing narrower until it seemed impossible that a horse could pass through. But Nakoa knew the way. He guided them through twists and turns that would have confused anyone else. past places where the stone walls nearly touched overhead, blocking out the sky. Then the canyon opened. Before them lay a hidden valley, small but lush by desert standards. A spring bubbled up from between the rocks, feeding a pool of clear water that reflected the darkening sky. Cottonwood trees grew around the water's edge, their leaves whispering in the breeze. Scattered among the trees were structures, not permanent buildings, but temporary shelters made of canvas, hide, and salvaged wood. Smoke rose from several cooking fires, and the smell of roasting meat drifted through the air. People emerged from the shelters as Nakoa rode in. There were perhaps 20 of them, maybe a few more. Men, women, a handful of children. Some were Apache, others looked Mexican. A few might have been white or mixed. All of them wore the hard-worn look of people who had been running for a long time. They watched Nakoa and Talasi with guarded curiosity, hands never far from weapons. Nakoa dismounted and reached up to help Talasi down. Her legs buckled the moment her feet touched the ground. She would have fallen if he had not caught her. Without a word, he lifted her into his arms and carried her toward one of the shelters near the back of the camp. Inside, he laid her on a bedroll made of blankets and animal hides. It was the softest thing she had touched in months. The shelter was simple but clean, with a small fire pit in the center and personal belongings stored neatly along the edges. Nakoa moved to a wooden chest and pulled out a water skin and a cloth. He knelt beside her and held the water to her lips. Slowly, he said, she drank, and the water was cool and sweet, better than anything she could remember. She wanted to gulp it down, to drain the entire skin, but he pulled it away after a few swallows. Too much at once will make you sick, he explained. We will give you more soon. He wet the cloth and began cleaning the wounds on her wrists where the rope had cut into her skin. His touch was careful, almost gentle, and it surprised her. Men like him, warriors, fighters, she had expected roughness. But his hands moved with precision, with care. These will need medicine, he said, examining the infected areas. I will have Yana look at them. She knows healing. Talasi found her voice at last, rough and cracked from disuse. Why did you do it? He paused, meeting her eyes. Do what? Save me. You do not know me. I'm nothing to you. Why risk yourself? Nakoa was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Then he said, I know what it is like to stand on a platform while others decide your worth. I know what it is like to be treated as less than human. No one should endure that. Not you, not anyone. They will come after you, Talasi said. The soldiers, the bounty hunters, you were already wanted. Now you have given them more reason. Let them come, Nakoa replied. His voice held no bravado, just simple fact. They have been hunting me for 3 years. They have not caught me yet. A woman entered the shelter, older, with grey streaking through her long black hair. She carried a basket filled with plants and small clay pots. Her eyes were sharp but not unkind. She looked at Talasi, then at Nakoa. This is the girl from Copper Falls, she said. It was not a question. Yes, Nakoa confirmed. Yana, she needs your skills. Rope burns, infected, cuts on her feet. She has not eaten properly in days, maybe weeks. Yana set down her basket and moved closer, her gaze traveling over Talasi with the practiced eye of someone who had treated many wounds. She is fortunate you found her when you did. Another few days, and the infection might have spread too far to stop. She began unpacking her supplies, pulling out dried herbs, cloth bandages, and a small jar of something that looked like salve. I will need privacy to work, she said to Nakoa. He nodded and stood. Before leaving, he looked back at Talasi. You are safe here. Rest. Heal. We will talk more when you are stronger. Then he was gone. Yana worked in silence for a time, cleaning the wounds with water infused with something that stung, but also soothed. She applied the salve, which smelled of sage and something else Talasi could not identify, then wrapped the wrists in clean cloth. She moved to Talasi's feet next, unwrapping the filthy bandages and making a soft sound of disapproval at what she found. You have walked far on these, Yana said. I had no choice, Talasi replied. Few of us do, Yana agreed. She cleaned the cuts carefully, removing bits of dirt and debris that had worked their way deep into the flesh. This will hurt. It did. Talasi bit down on the inside of her cheek to keep from crying out, tasting blood. But she did not pull away. She had endured worse. When Yana finished, she sat back and studied Talasi's face. "You are Navajo?" "Yes." "Your family?" "Gone," Talasi said flatly. "All of them. The soldiers came 2 years ago. They said we were on land that belonged to a railroad company. My father tried to show them our rights, papers that promised us we could stay. They burned the papers and burned our home. My mother and sister were killed in the fire. My brother tried to fight. They shot him. I ran. The words came out hollow, emptied of emotion through repetition. She had told this story before, to officers who did not care, to missionaries who offered prayers instead of help, to no one who made any difference. Yana's expression softened. "I am sorry. Lost like that, it leaves scars that never fully heal." "How long have you been here?" Talasi asked, wanting to change the subject. 2 years. I came from a mission school in Santa Fe. They said they would teach us to be civilized, to forget our old ways. But what they really wanted was to break us, to make us ashamed of who we were. I refused. They punished me. Nakoa heard about it and came for me. He has done that for many of us here. We are all running from something. "What is this place?" Talasi asked. "A refuge. A temporary home. We move every few months when the soldiers get too close. Nakoa knows this territory better than anyone. He finds places like this, hidden places where we can rest and regroup before moving again. How many are here?" 23 now with you. It changes. Some leave to try their luck elsewhere. Others arrive desperate and hunted. We take in anyone who needs shelter, regardless of tribe or blood. The only rule is that you contribute. Everyone works. Everyone shares. If you cannot work, you are still fed and cared for until you can. But no one rides for free? Talasi nodded. I can work. I'm good with plants, with medicine. My mother taught me, Yana smiled. Then you will be useful. We always need another healer. These men are constantly getting themselves injured, doing foolish things. She stood and gathered her supplies. I will bring you food. Start with broth and bread, nothing heavy. Your stomach needs time to adjust. Tomorrow, if you are stronger, I will show you around. For now, sleep. Your body needs it more than anything. After Yana left, Talasi lay back on the bedroll and stared up at the canvas ceiling. The sounds of the camp filtered in, low voices, laughter, the crackle of fires, the soft nicker of horses. It was strange being among people again. For so long, she had been alone, moving from place to place, trusting no one. And now she was here, in a camp full of outlaws and fugitives, brought by a man she did not know. Yet she felt safer than she had in months. Sleep came quickly, pulling her under before she could resist. She dreamed of her mother's face, of her sister's laughter, of a time before soldiers and fire and loss. And for the first time in a very long time, her dreams did not turn to nightmares. She woke to darkness. The fire in the shelter had burned down to embers, casting a faint red glow. Someone had covered her with an additional blanket while she slept. Outside, the camp was quiet save for the usual night sounds, wind in the trees, the distant call of an owl, the soft murmur of guards on watch. Talasi sat up slowly, testing her body. The pain was still there, but duller now, manageable. Her wrists and feet throbbed, but no longer felt like they were on fire. She was thirsty again and hungry, truly hungry, for the first time in days. She found the water skin where Nakoa had left it and allowed herself several careful swallows. Near the fire pit sat a covered bowl. She lifted the cloth and found it filled with a thick stew, still faintly warm. Someone had left it for her. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, feeling strength begin to return to her limbs. When she finished, she stood and moved to the entrance of the shelter. The night air was cool and clean, scented with sage and wood smoke. Stars filled the sky, more than she had ever seen, scattered across the darkness like seeds thrown by a generous hand. A figure sat near one of the fires, alone, staring into the flames. Even in silhouette, she recognized Nakoa. He sat with his back straight, shoulders relaxed, but there was a tension in him, a watchfulness that never fully left. He did not look like a man at rest. He looked like a man waiting for something. Talasi walked toward him. Her feet were wrapped in Yana's bandages, and she moved carefully, but she could walk. That alone felt like a victory. Nakoa looked up as she approached. Surprise flickered across his face, quickly hidden. "You should be resting," he said. "I have rested," Talasi replied. She gestured to the space beside him. "May I sit?" He nodded. She lowered herself to the ground, keeping a respectful distance between them. For a time, they sat in silence, watching the fire. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that did not need to be filled with words. Finally, Talasi spoke. "Yana told me about this place, about what you do. She talks too much," Nakoa said, but there was no real criticism in his tone. "She said you save people, that you have done this many times." "I do what I can," Nakoa said. "It is never enough." "It was enough for me," Talasi said quietly. He glanced at her, and in the firelight his expression softened. "You do not owe me gratitude. What I did, anyone with honor would have done, but no one else did," Talasi pointed out. They stood there and watched. "They would have let me be sold like an animal. You were the only one who acted." Nakoa poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling upward. "I have spent my life watching people do nothing while others suffer. I decided long ago that I would not be one of them, even if it cost me everything." "Has it?" Talasi asked. "Cost you everything?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Yes and no. I lost my home, my family's trust, my place among my people. But I gained something else: purpose, freedom, the chance to live by my own code instead of someone else's rules." "Do you regret it?" "Never," he said, and the certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. Talasi studied his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the scar that ran along his cheekbone, pale against his skin. "How did you get that?" she asked, gesturing to the scar. "A cavalry officer," Nakoa said. 3 years ago. He thought he had me cornered in an arroyo. He was wrong, but he got close enough to mark me first. And him, he did not leave the arroyo." The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken violence. Talasi did not flinch. She had seen enough of the world to know that survival sometimes required hard choices. "I am not afraid of you," she said. Nakoa looked at her fully then, his dark eyes searching her face. "Maybe you should be—" "Why, because I am dangerous. Because the life I lead, it does not allow for softness or safety. People who stay near me often end up hurt or dead. That is the truth." "Then why did you bring me here?" Talasi challenged. "Because leaving you there would have been worse." She held his gaze. "I have already lost everything. I have been hurt, hunted, starved, and sold. There is nothing you could do to me that the world has not already done. So no, I am not afraid of you. I'm grateful to you, and tomorrow I will begin earning my place here." Something shifted in Nakoa's expression, a crack in the armor he wore. He looked away, back at the fire, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. "You are stronger than you look." "I had to be," Talasi said. Strength was the only thing they could not take from me. The fire crackled and popped, and overhead a shooting star streaked across the sky. Brief and bright and gone, dawn broke cold and sharp over the canyon, painting the rocks in shades of purple and rose. Talasi woke to the sound of activity outside her shelter. Voices called to one another, low and purposeful. The horses whinnied. Metal clinked against metal. She sat up, her body protesting with aches that had settled deep into her bones overnight, but the pain was bearable. She unwrapped the bandages on her feet to examine Yana's work. The wounds looked better, the angry redness had faded and the swelling had gone down. She rewrapped them carefully and pulled on a pair of soft leather moccasins that someone had left beside her bedroll while she slept. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." When she emerged from the shelter, the camp was already awake and moving. Women tended cooking fires, while men checked weapons and saddles. Children hauled water from the spring in clay pots. Everyone had a task, everyone moved with purpose. No one was idle. Yana spotted her and waved her over to one of the fires, where a large pot hung over the flames, steam rising from whatever bubbled inside. "You look better," Yana observed. "Color in your face. That is good. Eat this." She handed Talasi a bowl of cornmeal mush mixed with bits of dried meat and wild onions. It was simple food, but it tasted like a feast. Talasi ate slowly, letting her stomach adjust to the warmth and substance. "What is happening?" Talasi asked between bites, gesturing to the activity around them. "Supply run," Yana explained. "Every 2 weeks, a group rides out to trade with friendly contacts. We trade game meat, tanned hides, sometimes information. In return, we get flour, salt, ammunition, medicine, things we cannot make or find ourselves. It is dangerous work. The routes change every time to avoid patterns." Soldiers watched the trading post. "Does Nakoa lead these runs?" "Always. He trusts no one else to negotiate. He has connections throughout the territory, people who owe him favors, people who respect him enough to risk helping us. But it is getting harder. The army has increased patrols. Bounty hunters are more aggressive. Last month we lost a man named Tavo. He was scouting ahead and rode into an ambush. They sent his body back to us as a warning." Talasi's hand tightened on her bowl. "And still you go?" "We have no choice. Without supplies, we starve. Without ammunition, we cannot defend ourselves. So we go and we hope we come back." Across the camp, Nakoa was checking his horse's saddle, pulling straps tight, testing stirrups. He wore the same rust-colored shirt from yesterday, but had added a leather vest and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. His rifle was slung across his back, and his knife hung at his hip. 3 other men stood with him, all armed, all wearing the same watchful expression. One of them, a younger man with a scar running through his left eyebrow, glanced toward Talasi and said something to Nakoa that she could not hear. Nakoa's response was brief, and the young man shrugged before returning to his horse. Nakoa walked over to where Talasi and Yana stood. He looked at Talasi, his gaze traveling briefly to her feet. "You are moving better." "Yana is a good healer," Talasi replied. "The best," Nakoa agreed. He turned to Yana. "We should be back by nightfall. If we are not back by dawn tomorrow, you know what to do." Yana nodded grimly. "Be careful, always," Nakoa said. He looked at Talasi again. "If you are strong enough, Yana will put you to work. We all contribute here." "I am strong enough," Talasi said. Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. Then he turned and walked back to his horse. Within minutes, the 4 riders were mounted and moving out of the canyon, disappearing through the narrow passage that led to the wider world beyond. Yana put Talasi to work immediately. First, she was sent to help the women processing a deer that had been killed the previous day. The animal hung from a cottonwood branch, and 2 women worked with practiced efficiency, skinning and butchering, while a third scraped the hide clean of fat and tissue. Talasi joined the 3rd woman, a Mexican girl named Rosa, who could not have been more than 16. Rosa showed her the technique, how to hold the scraping tool, how much pressure to apply, how to work in smooth, even strokes. The work was hard and bloody, and Talasi's hands cramped within the first hour. But she did not stop. She pushed through the pain, through the exhaustion that still clung to her, through the memories that tried to surface of other times, other work, other blood. Rosa talked while they worked, filling the silence with stories about her journey to the camp, about the village she had fled after her father tried to sell her to a mine foreman to pay off gambling debts. Her voice was light, almost cheerful, as if speaking of someone else's tragedy. By midday, they had finished with the deer. The meat was cut into strips and hung over a smoking rack to preserve it. The hide was stretched on a frame to dry. Nothing was wasted. Even the bones were saved, to be boiled later for broth or carved into tools. Yana found Talasi washing blood from her hands in the spring. "You did well," she said. "Rosa says you work hard and do not complain. That is all anyone asks here." "What else needs doing?" Talasi asked. "Come with me. I will show you the medicine stores. You said your mother taught you healing. I want to see what you know. Jana's shelter was larger than the others, divided into sections by hanging blankets. One section served as her living space. Another was dedicated entirely to medicine. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the ceiling, filling the air with a complex mixture of scents. Clay pots lined makeshift shelves, each labeled with symbols Talasi did not recognize. A work table held mortars and pestles, cutting boards, knives of various sizes. Jana gestured to the hanging bundles. Tell me what you see. Talasi walked along the rows, examining each bundle carefully. Yarrow for bleeding, sage for cleansing wounds, willow bark for pain and fever, chamomile for calming, juniper for digestion, tobacco for ceremony. She paused at one bundle she did not recognize. This one I do not know. Desert marigold, Jana said. Good for skin infections. I will teach you. What else? Talasi continued, naming plant after plant, explaining their uses, suggesting combinations for different ailments. Jana listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking questions. When Talasi finished, Jana was smiling. Your mother taught you well. You know more than most healers twice your age. I could use help here. The men are constantly injuring themselves, and I am not as young as I once was. If you are willing, I will teach you what I know, and you can teach me what your mother taught you. I am willing, Talasi said. The thought of having purpose again, of using skills she had feared were lost, sent a warmth through her chest that had nothing to do with the afternoon heat. They spent the rest of the day organizing the medicine stores, grinding herbs, preparing salves and tinctures. Jana explained her system of organization, showed Talasi where to find things, taught her the symbols she used for labeling. They worked side by side, and for the first time since her family died, Talasi felt something like peace. As the sun began its descent, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and amber, Talasi stepped outside for air. The camp had settled into evening routines. Fires were being built up for cooking. Children played a game with sticks and a ball made of bound leather. Guards took up positions at the canyon entrance, watching the path for the return of the supply run. The young man with the scarred eyebrow, the one who had spoken to Nakoa that morning, approached her. Up close, she could see he was probably only a few years older than her, though his eyes held the hardness of someone who had seen too much. "You are the one Nakoa brought from Copper Falls," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," Talasi replied. "I am Kai. I ride with Nakoa, have for 2 years now." He studied her with unconcealed curiosity. He has never done that before. Brought someone back like that. Usually he just points people in our direction and lets them find their own way. But he carried you himself. I could not walk, Talasi said. Still, it was different. People are talking. Let them talk, Talasi said coolly. I owe Nakoa my life. Beyond that, there is nothing to discuss. Kai's expression shifted, something between amusement and respect crossing his features. Fair enough. Just so you know, not everyone here is happy about it. Some think bringing you was reckless, that it draws unnecessary attention, that Nakoa is taking too many risks. And what do you think? I think Nakoa has kept us alive for 3 years when most expected us to last 3 months. I think he has earned the right to make his own choices. And I think anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with him directly. Kai glanced toward the canyon entrance. They should have been back by now. Talasi followed his gaze. The sun was touching the horizon, and shadows were growing long. How long does it usually take? They left at dawn. Trading post is 4 hours ride. An hour to conduct business, 4 hours back. They should have returned before now. Unease rippled through the camp. Others had noticed the delay. God stood straighter, hands moving to weapons. Conversations grew quieter, more tense. Jana appeared at Talasi's side. Something is wrong, she said softly. Then they heard it. Hoofbeats, fast and hard, echoing through the canyon passage. Everyone turned toward the sound. Hands reached for rifles and pistols. Children were quickly ushered into shelters. A single horse burst through the narrow opening, running full out, foam flying from its mouth. The rider was slumped forward, barely holding on. Blood soaked his shirt and dripped onto the horse's neck. It was one of the men who had left with Nakoa that morning. Talasi recognized him from the campfire, an older man named Marcus with grey in his beard. He fell from the saddle before anyone could reach him, hitting the ground hard. People rushed forward. Yana was there first, dropping to her knees beside him, her hands immediately moving to assess his injuries. Talasi ran to help, her own pain forgotten. Marcus had been shot twice, once in the shoulder and once in the side. Blood pulsed from both wounds, dark and thick. His breathing was shallow and rapid, his skin pale and clammy. Yana barked orders and people scattered to follow them. Someone brought blankets. Another ran for water and bandages. "Marcus," Yana said urgently, leaning close to his face. "Marcus, can you hear me? What happened? Where are the others?" His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy with pain. His lips moved, but no sound came out. "Do not try to talk," Yana said. "Save your strength." Talasi, pressure on the shoulder wound. "I will work on the side." Talasi pressed her hands against the shoulder wound, feeling hot blood pulse between her fingers. She bore down hard, using her weight, trying to slow the bleeding. Beside her, Yana worked with swift precision, cutting away Marcus's shirt, probing the wound in his side. "The bullet is still in there," Yana muttered. "I need to get it out or he will die from infection." Marcus's hand suddenly shot out, grabbing Yana's wrist with surprising strength. His eyes found hers, wide and desperate. He forced words out, each one a struggle. "Ambush, trading post. Soldiers waiting. Trap, where is Nakoa?" Yana demanded. "Captured. Took him chained, the others dead." Marcus coughed and blood flecked his lips. "They knew. Someone told them. Someone here." The words hit the camp like a physical blow. Shocked silence descended, broken only by Marcus's labored breathing. "What do you mean, someone here?" Kai demanded, pushing through the crowd. Who betrayed us?" Marcus's grip on Yana's wrist loosened. His eyes started to drift closed. "Stay with me," Yana commanded, but his body was going limp, the tension draining out of him. Talasi pressed harder on the wound, but the blood flow was slowing, not because the wound was closing, but because his heart was failing. "Yana," she said quietly. Yana looked at Marcus's face, at his still chest, and her shoulders sagged. She reached out and gently closed his eyes. "He is gone." For a moment no one moved. Then the camp erupted. People shouted questions, accusations. Someone started crying. Arguments broke out about what to do, whether to flee or fight, whether to try a rescue or cut their losses. Kai's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. "Enough! Everyone quiet!" When the noise died down, he continued. "If what Marcus said is true, if there is a traitor among us, they could still be here. No one leaves this camp. No one goes anywhere alone. We post double guards, and we figure out who the hell sold us out." Talasi barely heard him. Her mind was spinning, replaying Marcus's words. Nakoa was captured, chained. The man who had saved her, who had shown her the first real kindness in years, was now in the hands of the very people he had been running from. The people who wanted him dead. She looked down at her hands, still covered in Marcus's blood, and felt something harden inside her. She had been saved. She had been given a chance to live. And now the man responsible for that was going to die unless someone did something. She stood, her legs steady despite everything, and walked to where Kai stood arguing with two other men about defensive positions. "I am going after him," she said. All three men turned to stare at her. "What?" Kai said. "Nakoa, I am going after him." "Tonight?" Kai's expression shifted from surprise to something like pity. "You cannot even ride properly, and you want to take on the United States Army by yourself. Then come with me," Talasi said, "or stay here and wait for them to come finish what they started. Because if there is a traitor here, they know where this camp is. They know how many of us there are. How long do you think it will take before soldiers surround this canyon?" The two men exchanged glances. One of them, a scarred man with a missing ear, spoke up. "The girl has a point. If they have Nakoa, they will make him talk. And if he does not talk, they will track his horse's trail back here anyway. Nakoa will not talk," Kai said firmly. "Then they will follow the trail," the scarred man countered. "Either way, we are compromised." Kai ran a hand through his hair, frustration clear on his face. He looked at Talasi, really looked at her, and something in his expression changed. "You are serious? You would actually go?" "He saved my life," Talasi said simply. "I will not let him die for it." Kai was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, we go tonight. Small group, fast and quiet. 3 of us. Any more and we will be spotted. Talasi, me and Rafe." He gestured to the scarred man. "We leave in 1 hour. Prepare whatever you need." Talasi turned to go, but Yana caught her arm. "You are not healed. Your feet are still wounded. You have not ridden in months. This is suicide." "Maybe," Talasi agreed. "But it is my choice to make." Yana held her gaze for a long moment, then sighed and released her arm. "Come with me. If you are determined to die, at least let me make sure you are properly equipped first." As night fell over the canyon, 3 horses stood saddled and ready. Kai checked weapons and ammunition. Rafe studied a rough map by firelight. And Talasi, dressed in clothes Yana had given her, sturdy and dark, stood looking toward the canyon entrance where somewhere beyond, in the darkness, a man waited in chains. She thought of his words by the fire the night before. "I do what I can. It is never enough. Tonight it would have to be." The moon hung like a silver coin in the cloudless sky, providing just enough light to navigate by, but not enough to expose them. Talasi rode between Kai and Rafe, her body remembering the rhythm of horseback despite the months away from it. Her feet throbbed in the stirrups, but she pushed the pain down into that deep place where she kept all the things that would break her if she let them surface. The horse beneath her was steady and sure-footed, a grey mare that Yana had insisted she take, claiming the animal had the best night vision of any in their herd. They moved in silence through terrain that seemed alien in the darkness. Rocks cast strange shadows. Cacti became menacing shapes. Every sound, the scrape of a hoof on stone, the rustle of wind through brush, the distant cry of a coyote, felt amplified and dangerous. Kai led them on a route that avoided the main trails, keeping to high ground where they could see approaching threats. He had done this before, Talasi realized. The way he moved, the way he read the land, even in darkness, spoke of practice and survival. Rafe brought up the rear, constantly checking behind them, making sure they were not followed. After 2 hours of hard riding, Kai raised his hand and they stopped. Below them, perhaps a mile distant, the lights of a military outpost flickered like fallen stars. It was smaller than Talasi had expected, just a handful of buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade. But even from this distance, she could see guards walking the perimeter, could make out the shapes of horses in a corral, could hear the faint sounds of men's voices carried on the night wind. Kai dismounted, and the others followed. They tied their horses to a stunted pine and moved forward on foot, staying low, using rocks and brush for cover. As they drew closer, the outpost details became clearer. The main building was a long, low structure that likely served as barracks. A smaller building beside it probably housed officers. A third structure, separate from the others and surrounded by its own fence, had bars on the windows. The stockade. "There," Kai whispered, pointing. "That is where they will be keeping him." "How many guards?" Talasi asked. "I count 6 walking the walls. Probably more inside. Maybe 20 soldiers total at a post this size." "Bad odds." Kai studied the layout, his eyes moving systematically from building to building, noting sightlines and blind spots. Rafe leaned close. "There is a gap on the east side, where the wall meets that rocky outcrop. Guards cannot see it from their positions. If we time it right, we could slip through there, get to the stockade." "And then what?" Kai said. "Even if we get him out, we still have to get past 20 soldiers and ride out before they sound the alarm." "We create a distraction," Talasi said. Both men looked at her. "The corral." "If we spook the horses, send them running through the camp, it will create chaos. Everyone will be focused on catching them. That is when we move." Kai considered this, then nodded slowly. "It could work. Rafe, you handle the horses. Get them running toward the main buildings, maximum confusion. Talasi and I will go for the stockade. We get Nakoa, we run for the east wall, and we pray we make it, and if we do not," Rafe asked, Then at least we tried. Kai checked his weapons, a rifle and 2 pistols. Give us 10 minutes to get in position. When you hear the horses, you know we are moving. Rafe gripped Kai's shoulder briefly, then melted into the darkness toward the corral. Kai gestured for Talasi to follow him. They circled wide, staying well outside the range of the guard's torchlight, working their way toward the eastern edge of the outpost. The rocky outcrop Rafe had mentioned provided cover, and they pressed themselves against it, feeling the residual heat of the day still radiating from the stone. Up close, the stockade looked more formidable. The walls were thick timber, and the door was reinforced with iron bands. A single guard sat on a stool outside, his rifle across his knees, his head nodding forward in drowsiness. Kai pulled out his knife, the blade dark and non-reflective. He looked at Talasi and mouthed the words, "Stay here." She wanted to argue, but knew he was right. She had no training in this kind of violence, no experience with quiet killing. If she interfered, she would only get them both caught. So she stayed pressed against the rock and watched as Kai moved like a shadow across the open ground. The guard never knew what happened. One moment he was dozing, the next Kai's hand was over his mouth, and the knife was sliding between his ribs. The man jerked once, then went still. Kai lowered him gently to the ground and dragged him into the shadows. Then he waved for Talasi to come. She ran low and fast, her heart hammering against her ribs. When she reached him, Kai was already working on the stockade door. The lock was heavy and old, designed more to contain than to secure against skilled intrusion. Kai pulled a thin piece of metal from his pocket and worked it into the mechanism, his fingers moving with practiced precision. Somewhere in the distance, horses began to whinny. Then came the sound of stampeding hooves, dozens of them, and men shouting in alarm. Rafe had done his job. The lock clicked open. Kai pulled the door wide and they slipped inside. The stockade's interior was a single room, windowless, except for the barred openings high on the walls. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, blood, and fear. 3 cells lined the back wall, separated by iron bars. 2 were empty. In the third, a figure sat slumped against the wall, wrists chained above his head. Nakoa. Even in the dim light filtering through the barred windows, Talasi could see the damage they had done to him. His face was swollen, one eye nearly closed. Blood crusted his lip and ran from his nose. His shirt had been torn away, revealing bruises that covered his ribs and chest. But when he heard them enter, his head lifted, and his one good eye focused on them with sharp awareness. "Kai," he said, his voice rough but steady. "You should not be here." "Shut up," Kai said, moving to the cell door. He went to work on this lock as well, his hands moving even faster than before. Outside, the chaos was growing. Men were running, shouting orders, trying to corral panicked horses. But it would not last forever. "Who is with you?" Nakoa asked. Then his gaze found Talasi, and his expression shifted from surprise to something that might have been anger. "No, Kai, why did you bring her?" "She insisted," Kai said. "And she had a good plan. Now stop talking so I can concentrate." The lock resisted, more complex than the outer door. Kai cursed under his breath and tried a different approach. Seconds crawled by like hours. Talasi moved to the cell bars, looking at Nakoa through them. "You came for me," he said quietly. "You came for me first," Talasi replied. "That was different. I had nothing to lose, neither do I." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. He had saved her because he believed she deserved freedom. She had come for him because she believed he deserved the same. It was simple and complicated all at once. The lock clicked open. Kai pulled the cell door wide and moved to the chains holding Nakoa's wrists. These had no locks, just pins that had been driven through the links to hold them closed. Kai worked one free, then the other. The chains fell away, and Nakoa lowered his arms with a pained grunt. "Can you walk?" Kai asked. "I can run if I have to," Nakoa said, pushing himself to his feet. He swayed slightly, but steadied himself against the wall. "Where are the horses?" "A mile north. We came on foot from there." "Smart." Nakoa looked at Talasi again. When we get out of here, you and I are going to have a long conversation about risk and foolishness. I look forward to it, Talasi said. They moved to the door. The chaos outside had not diminished, but it was starting to organize. Officers were shouting orders, forming men into groups to search the perimeter. Soon someone would think to check the stockade. Kai peered out, assessing the situation. East wall, same way we came in. Stay low, stay quiet. If we are spotted, we run, and we do not stop. They slipped out into the night. The guard Kai had killed still lay where he had been left, hidden in shadow. They moved along the stockade's wall, using it for cover, working their way toward the rocky outcrop. Torchlight played across the ground ahead of them, and they froze, pressing themselves flat against the timber. A group of soldiers ran past, heading toward the corral, their attention focused on the continuing chaos. When they were gone, the three moved again. They reached the outcrop and began to climb, using handholds that were barely visible in the moonlight. Talasi's feet screamed in protest, but she did not slow down. Behind her, she could hear Nakoa's labored breathing, could sense him struggling with injuries that were worse than he was letting on. They crested the outcrop and dropped down the other side, out of sight of the outpost. But they were not safe yet. They still had nearly a mile of open ground to cover before reaching the horses, and every second increased the chance that someone would discover Nakoa was gone. They ran. The terrain was treacherous in the darkness, full of hidden rocks and sudden dips. Talasi stumbled twice but caught herself. Kai moved ahead, setting the pace while Rafe brought up the rear, having rejoined them from his position at the corral. Behind them, the outpost was fully alert now, torches moving in organized patterns as soldiers began a systematic search. Then came the sound they had been dreading. A bell began to clang, harsh and insistent. Someone had checked the stockade. They know, Kai said. Move faster! Nakoa was falling behind, his injuries slowing him down. Talasi dropped back and grabbed his arm, pulling it over her shoulder, lending him her support. He tried to shrug her off, but she held firm. Save your pride for later, she said through gritted teeth. Together they ran, an awkward three-legged race across the desert floor. The horses came into view, still tied where they had been left, ears pricked forward at the approaching sounds of pursuit. Behind them, torches were spreading out from the outpost like a plague of fireflies, and voices were calling to each other in the darkness. They reached the horses, and Kai practically threw Nakoa onto his mount. Talasi climbed onto the grey mare, while Kai and Rafe took their own horses. They wheeled the animals north and dug in their heels. The horses lunged forward, sensing their riders' urgency. They ran flat out across the desert, hooves pounding, manes flying. Behind them, the shouts grew more distant but did not disappear. The soldiers had horses too, and they would be coming. They rode for an hour without stopping, pushing the animals as hard as they dared. When they finally slowed to let the horses breathe, Talasi looked back and saw nothing but darkness. Either they had lost their pursuers, or the soldiers were tracking them more carefully, waiting for daylight to make their move. Nakoa sat hunched in his saddle, one hand pressed against his ribs. In the moonlight, his face was pale and drawn. Kai moved his horse closer, studying him with concern. "How bad?" Kai asked. "Bad enough," Nakoa admitted. "Ribs might be cracked. Hard to breathe. But I will live." "We need to get you back to Yana," Talasi said. "We need to get everyone out of that canyon," Nakoa countered. "If Marcus was right, if there is a traitor, the soldiers know where we are. We have maybe hours before they move on the camp. Then we ride hard," Rafe said. "Push the horses. Get there before dawn. Evacuate everyone before the soldiers can surround us." They started moving again. This time, at a steady lope that ate up the miles without completely exhausting the horses. As they rode, Nakoa maneuvered his mount alongside Talasi's. "You should not have come," he said. "So you have said. I mean it. You could have been killed. You could have been captured. After everything you survived, everything you endured, you risked it all for me. Why?" Talasi looked at him, at his battered face and fierce eyes, and spoke a truth she had not fully acknowledged until that moment. Because in 3 years of running, of hiding, of barely surviving, you were the first person who made me feel like I mattered. Not as property, not as a burden, just as a person. I could not let them take that away. Nakoa was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. You do matter. More than you know. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. They rode on through the remainder of the night, racing against time and fate. The canyon appeared just as the eastern sky began to lighten from black to gray. They pushed the exhausted horses through the narrow passage and into the hidden valley. The camp was already stirring, people emerging from shelters at the sound of hooves. When they saw Nakoa, alive and mounted, a cheer went up. But it died quickly when they saw his condition and the expressions on the faces of his rescuers. Yana rushed forward as they dismounted. She took one look at Nakoa and immediately began issuing orders. People scattered to follow them. Nakoa tried to speak, but Yana cut him off. You will sit. You will be quiet. You will let me examine you. Everything else can wait, but Nakoa grabbed her wrist gently but firmly. It cannot wait. The soldiers are coming. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, but soon. We need to evacuate. Now, everyone takes only what they can carry. We leave within the hour. The camp erupted into controlled chaos as people began breaking down shelters and packing supplies. Children were roused and dressed. Horses were saddled and loaded. Everything that could not be carried was buried or burned. Talasi helped where she could, her exhaustion forgotten in the urgency of the moment. She worked alongside Yana, packing medicine supplies into saddlebags, making sure nothing critical was left behind. As she worked, she noticed people watching her differently than they had before. There was respect in their eyes now, acknowledgement that she had proven herself. Kai found her as she was tying down the last of the medical supplies. Nakoa wants to see you. His shelter. She walked to where Nakoa sat on his bedroll, his torso wrapped in clean bandages, his face freshly cleaned of blood. He looked up as she entered. They tell me you rode like you were born to it, he said. They tell me it was your plan that got us in and out. Kai and Rafe did the hard work, Talasi said, but you came. That was the hardest part. He stood slowly, wincing. I owe you my life. Now we are even. No, Nakoa said. We are not. He reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and solid despite everything. You did not have to come for me. You chose to. That is different from settling a debt. That is something else entirely. Talasi looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers intertwined with hers, and felt something shift in her chest. Something that was not gratitude or obligation, but something deeper, more dangerous, more real. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now we run again. We find a new place, build a new camp. We survive. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. But this time you run with me. Not because you owe me. Not because you have nowhere else to go. But because you choose to. She met his eyes and saw in them the same thing she felt, something neither of them had dared to name. I choose to, she said. Outside, someone called that they were ready to move. Nakoa released her hand reluctantly, and they walked out together into the grey dawn. The camp that had been their refuge was being methodically destroyed, all evidence of their presence erased. Within minutes, it would be as if they had never been there at all. They mounted their horses and began to file out of the canyon, a long line of refugees and fighters, heading north toward new territory and uncertain futures. Talasi rode near the front, close to Nakoa, and as they emerged from the narrow passage into the wider world, she looked back one last time at the place that had given her shelter. Then she turned forward and did not look back again. They traveled for 3 days without stopping longer than necessary to rest the horses. The group moved like ghosts across the territory, avoiding roads and settlements, keeping to high ground where they could see pursuers coming from miles away. Nakoa led them through terrain so remote that even the most experienced trackers would struggle to follow. They crossed rivers to break their trail, rode through rocky ground that left no hoofprints, doubled back on their own path to confuse anyone foolish enough to try tracking them. But the tension that had settled over the group since Marcus's dying words refused to lift. Someone among them had betrayed Nakoa to the soldiers. Someone had given up their location, their routines, their vulnerabilities, and that someone was still with them, still riding alongside people who trusted them, still waiting for another opportunity to strike. Talasi watched the faces around the campfires at night, trying to read guilt in tired eyes and drawn faces. But everyone looked suspicious when you were searching for a traitor. Every sidelong glance became meaningful. Every whispered conversation became sinister. She found herself doubting people she had worked beside, people who had shown her kindness. On the second night, she sat watch with Kai while the others slept. The fire had burned down to coals, and the darkness pressed close around them. Kai cleaned his rifle methodically, a task he performed every night with the same careful attention. "You are thinking about the traitor," he said without looking up. "How can I not?" Talasi replied. "One of these people sold Nakoa to the army, got Marcus and the others killed. They are still here, still pretending to be loyal." "Nakoa knows," Kai said. "He has been watching everyone since we left the canyon. He sees things most people miss. If there is a snake among us, he will find it. And then what?" Kai's hands stilled on the rifle. "Then justice. Desert justice. Quick and final." He looked at her directly. "Does that bother you?" Talasi thought about Marcus dying in the dirt, about Nakoa chained and beaten, about all the people whose lives had been destroyed by someone's greed or cowardice. "No," she said, "it does not." They reached their destination on the afternoon of the third day. It was another canyon, deeper and more remote than the last, with only one entrance that could be easily defended. A stream ran through it year-round, and cottonwoods provided shade and cover. Ancient pictographs decorated the canyon walls, faded images of hunters and animals, painted by people who had lived here long before the Spanish came, before the Americans, before any of this had become complicated by borders and wars. The group set about making camp with practiced efficiency. Shelters went up quickly. Fire pits were dug. Watchers were posted. Within hours, the canyon began to look lived in, though everyone knew this was temporary. Everything was temporary now. Talasi helped Yana establish a new medicine area in a sheltered alcove near the stream. As they worked unpacking supplies and organizing them, Yana spoke in a low voice. "People are afraid," she said, "not just of soldiers or bounty hunters. They are afraid of each other. This suspicion, it is poison. It will destroy us faster than any army." "Then we need to find the traitor," Talasi said, "and if we are wrong, if we accuse an innocent person, that would be just as destructive." Yana arranged bundles of dried herbs on a flat rock. "Nakoa is in a difficult position. He must act, but he must be certain. When mistaken, he loses the trust of everyone." That night, Nakoa called a gathering. Everyone assembled around the largest fire, forming a circle. Children were sent to the shelters, told to stay inside no matter what they heard. Guards remained at their posts, but everyone else was required to attend. The mood was tense, expectant. Nakoa stood by the fire, his face still showing the bruises from his captivity, but his bearing strong and commanding. He let the silence stretch, his gaze moving from face to face, studying each person in turn. "3 days ago," he began, his voice carrying clearly in the still night air, "our people were betrayed. Marcus is dead because of it. 2 other good men are dead. I was captured and would have been hanged if not for the courage of 3 people who risked everything to free me." He paused. "The soldiers knew where to find us. They knew when we would be at the trading posts. They knew how many riders to expect. This was not luck or coincidence. This was specific information that could only have come from someone in this camp." Murmurs rippled through the gathering. People shifted uncomfortably, avoiding each other's eyes. "I know there is a traitor among us," Nakoa continued. "And I know who it is." The murmurs stopped. Everyone went very still. Nakoa's gaze settled on a man sitting near the back of the circle. He was middle-aged, with thinning hair and a soft body that spoke of a life that had once been comfortable. His name was William Coates, and he had joined the group 4 months earlier, claiming to be fleeing charges of theft from a mining company that had cheated him of wages. He had been quiet, helpful, never causing trouble. "William," Nakoa said. "Stand up!" William's face went pale. "I do not understand." "Stand up," Nakoa repeated, his voice harder. William rose slowly, his hands trembling. "Nakoa, whatever you think, you are wrong. I would never—" "Empty your pockets," Nakoa ordered. "This is ridiculous." "I have done nothing." Kai moved behind William, his hand on his pistol. "Empty them." "Now—" William's hands shook as he pulled items from his pockets. A knife, a few coins, a small cloth bag of tobacco. He held them out, his face desperate. "See? Nothing, just my belongings." "The inside pocket," Nakoa said. "Left side of your coat." William's expression changed, fear replacing indignation. "I do not know what you mean." Kai reached around and pulled open William's coat, exposing an inside pocket that had been sewn with deliberate concealment. He reached in and pulled out a small leather pouch. Opening it, he dumped the contents into his palm. Gold coins glinted in the firelight. 20 of them, each stamped with the seal of the United States Army. Gasps erupted from the circle. People stood, anger replacing shock on their faces. "That is not mine," William stammered. "Someone put that there. I have been set up. The army pays informants in gold," Nakoa said, his voice cold. $20 for information leading to the capture of wanted men. That is the standard bounty for someone like me." He stepped closer to William. "How long have you been reporting to them?" "I have not." "I swear, the truth," Nakoa demanded. "You owe these people that much." William's face crumpled. The defiance drained out of him and his shoulders sagged. When he spoke, his voice was small and broken. 6 weeks. I have been passing information for 6 weeks. He looked around the circle at the angry, betrayed faces. "They caught me trying to steal supplies from an army depot. Said they would hang me unless I cooperated. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to die before betraying your own people," someone shouted. "I am not your people." William shot back, some of his fear converting to anger. "I'm not Apache or Mexican or whatever the rest of you are. I am white. I have family in Pennsylvania. I do not belong here." "Then why did you come?" Yana asked, her voice cutting through the anger. "Because I had nowhere else to go," William said. "Because the mining company wanted me dead, and this seemed like a good place to hide. But then the army found me and gave me a choice. Help them or die. I chose to live, and Marcus chose to die because of your choice," Kai said, his hand tightening on his pistol. "Nakoa almost died. We all almost died." William turned to Nakoa, desperation in his eyes. "I did not want anyone to get hurt. I just gave them small things, information they would have found out anyway. I did not know they would set a trap." "You knew enough," Nakoa said. "You knew what you were doing. You knew the cost." He looked at the gathered group. "This man betrayed us. He sold our location, our routines, our trust for gold. What should be done with him? Kill him," someone shouted. Others echoed the sentiment, but an older woman, a grandmother who had lost family to violence, spoke up. "If we kill him, we become what they say we are. Savages, murderers. We are better than that, are we?" Kai challenged. "He would have gotten all of us killed. He deserves death." The argument escalated, voices rising, hands moving toward weapons. The unity that had held the group together was fracturing before Talasi's eyes. She could see it in Nakoa's face too, the recognition that this moment would define what kind of leader he was, what kind of people they would become. Nakoa raised his hand, and the arguing ceased. "We will not kill him," he said. The decision clearly cost him, but his voice was firm. "Not because he does not deserve it, but because if we start executing our own, even traitors, we lose the thing that makes us different from the people hunting us. We lose our humanity." "Then what do we do with him?" Rafe asked. "We exile him," Nakoa said. "We take everything he owns, except the clothes he wears and one day's water. We send him into the desert on foot. If he survives, if he finds his way to civilization, that is between him and whatever god he prays to. But he will never set foot in our camp again. He will never be trusted by any of our people. And if I ever see him again, I will not be so merciful." Some people nodded, accepting the judgment. Others looked unsatisfied, wanting blood. But no one challenged Nakoa's decision. William was stripped of his possessions, including the gold coins which Nakoa divided among the group, using the traitor's payment to buy supplies they desperately needed. He was given a canteen of water and pointed toward the south, where settlements lay 2 days' walk away. Before he left, Talasi found herself standing before him. She did not know why she had sought him out, what she hoped to accomplish. He looked at her with haunted eyes. "You think I'm a monster," he said. "I think you were afraid," Talasi replied. "I think you made a choice that seemed reasonable to you at the time. But choices have consequences. People died because of yours." "I know," William whispered. "I will live with that until I die." "Good," Talasi said. "You should—" She turned to walk away, then looked back. "If you truly have family in Pennsylvania, go to them. Leave this territory and never come back. Because if you stay, if you continue to work with the army, Nakoa will find you. And next time, he will not show mercy." William nodded and walked into the darkness, becoming a shadow among shadows, then disappearing entirely. The camp was subdued that night. People spoke in hushed voices, if they spoke at all. The betrayal had wounded them in ways that went deeper than physical injury. Trust, once broken, was not easily repaired. Talasi found Nakoa sitting alone on a ridge overlooking the camp, his silhouette dark against the star-filled sky. She climbed up to sit beside him, saying nothing at first, just sharing the silence. "You think I was wrong?" he finally said. "To let him live?" "No," Talasi replied. "I think you did what you believed was right. That is all any of us can do." "People are angry. They think I am weak. People are frightened. They wanted easy justice, clean and simple. But you gave them something harder. You gave them a choice about what kind of people they want to be." She looked at his profile, at the tension in his jaw. "That takes more strength than killing him would have." Nakoa was quiet for a long moment. "I'm tired, Talasi. Tired of running. Tired of always looking over my shoulder. Tired of watching good people die for nothing." "Then stop," she said. He turned to look at her. "What? Stop running. Not here, not now. But eventually, find a place so remote that no one will bother looking. Build something permanent. Make a real home instead of temporary camps. There is nowhere that remote," Nakoa said. "The army has maps. The territory is shrinking every year. Then go where there are no maps," Talasi suggested. "Deep into Apache lands where white men fear to go. Or south into Mexico where American soldiers have no authority. There are places, Nakoa. Places where people like us could live without constantly running." He studied her face in the starlight. "You have thought about this. Every day since you brought me here. Every time we break camp and move. Every time someone looks at me with suspicion or fear. Yes, I have thought about it." She met his gaze directly. "I am tired too. Tired of surviving. I want to live. Really live. And I do not think that is possible while we keep running." Nakoa reached out and took her hand, his fingers warm and calloused against hers. "If we did that, if we found such a place and built something permanent, would you stay? Would you build it with me?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that went far beyond simple geography. Talasi felt her heart beating hard in her chest. This was not just about finding a home. This was about choosing a future. "Choosing him, yes," she said simply. "I would." He leaned toward her and she met him halfway, their lips coming together under the vast desert sky. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, two people who had been hurt learning to trust again. Then it deepened, becoming something more urgent, more real. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. She pressed closer, feeling the warmth of him, the solid reality of him. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nakoa rested his forehead against hers. "I have never wanted to stay anywhere before," he said quietly. "Never wanted to build something knowing I would have to leave it. But with you, I want to try." "Then we will," Talasi said. Together, they sat on that ridge long into the night, talking in low voices about possibilities and futures, about places they might go and lives they might build. And for the first time since either of them could remember, the future felt like something worth planning for, instead of something to simply endure. Below them, the camp slowly settled into sleep. Guards changed shifts, fires burned down to embers, and in the shelters, people dreamed of safety that always seemed just out of reach. But on the ridge, two people held each other and dared to imagine something different. The attack came at dawn, when the light was still grey and uncertain. Talasi woke to the sound of gunfire, echoing through the canyon like thunder trapped between stone walls. She rolled from her bedroll, heart already racing, hands reaching for the knife Yana had given her. Outside, chaos had erupted. People were running, shouting, grabbing weapons, and children in equal measure. Horses screamed in terror. More gunfire cracked through the morning air, sharp and deadly. She emerged from her shelter to see soldiers pouring through the canyon entrance, at least 30 of them, maybe more. They had come silently in the pre-dawn darkness, positioning themselves before anyone in the camp had noticed. Now they advanced with military precision, rifles raised, firing at anything that moved. Nakoa was already organizing the defense, his voice cutting through the panic with clear, sharp commands. Men took up positions behind rocks and trees, returning fire. Women herded children toward the back of the canyon, where a narrow trail led up and over the rim. It was their only escape route, and everyone knew it. A bullet struck the ground near Talasi's feet, kicking up a spray of dirt. She dove behind a water barrel and found Yana already there, her face pale but determined. The older woman gripped Talasi's arm. "Help me get the children out," Yana said. "The trail. We need to get them to the trail." They ran in a crouch toward where a group of terrified children huddled against the canyon wall. Rosa was with them, trying to keep them calm, but her own fear was evident in her wide eyes. Bullets whined overhead. A man screamed somewhere to their left. The smell of gunpowder filled the air, acrid and choking. Talasi grabbed the nearest child, a boy of perhaps 5, and pushed him toward the trail. "Run," she told him. "Climb as fast as you can, and do not look back." Yana and Rosa did the same with the others, sending them scrambling up the steep path. More soldiers were flooding into the canyon now. The defenders were outnumbered and outgunned. This was not a skirmish. This was an overwhelming force meant to end them once and for all. Someone had told the army exactly where they were, exactly when to strike. William, Talasi realized. He had not walked away after all. He had gone straight back to his handlers and given them everything. Kai fought near the canyon entrance, his rifle barking steadily as he tried to slow the advance. But for every soldier that fell, 2 more appeared. Rafe was somewhere in the smoke and confusion, his distinctive war cry rising above the gunfire. And Nakoa moved through the battle like a force of nature, his rifle in one hand and his knife in the other, striking with lethal efficiency. But even he could not hold back this tide. A soldier broke through the defensive line and charged toward the women and children. Talasi saw him coming, saw the bayonet fixed to his rifle, saw the determination in his face. She stepped in front of the children, her knife held in a grip that was probably all wrong, but it was all she had. The soldier raised his rifle. Time seemed to slow. Talasi could see every detail, the sweat on his face, the fear in his eyes that mirrored her own, the way his finger tightened on the trigger. Then Nakoa was there, appearing as if from nowhere, his knife flashing in the morning light. The soldier went down without a sound. Nakoa grabbed Talasi's arm, his face intense. "Get to the trail," he ordered. "Take everyone you can and get out of this canyon." "I am not leaving you," Talasi said. "You have to," Nakoa replied. He pushed her toward the trail. "Go now. I will hold them as long as I can. Nakoa, go!" he shouted, then turned and fired at an advancing group of soldiers. Yana grabbed Talasi and pulled her toward the trail. More people were climbing now, struggling up the steep path with children on their backs and the wounded supported between them. The trail was barely wide enough for one person, carved into the canyon wall centuries ago by people who had also been running from something. Talasi climbed, her injured feet screaming with every step, her lungs burning. Below, the battle raged. She could see Nakoa and Kai and the others fighting desperately, giving the rest of them time to escape. She watched a soldier aim at Nakoa's back and screamed a warning that was lost in the noise. Nakoa turned at the last second, firing from the hip, and the soldier fell. But there were too many. Always too many. The canyon was being overrun. The defenders fell back step by step, giving ground they could not afford to lose. Bodies lay scattered across the camp, both soldiers and defenders. The price of this morning's violence paid in blood. Talasi reached the top of the trail and turned to help others up. Yona came next, then Rosa with 2 small children. More followed, exhausted and terrified. But so many were still below, still fighting, still dying. Then she saw Kai go down, a bullet catching him in the leg. He fell hard and tried to rise but could not. A soldier stood over him, rifle raised for a finishing shot. Rafe appeared from the smoke and tackled the soldier, his knife rising and falling. But more soldiers were coming. Kai would not make it out. Nakoa saw it too. He made a choice in that instant. A choice that Talasi recognized even from this distance. He ran toward Kai, firing to clear a path, then grabbed his friend and hauled him up. Together they staggered toward the trail, Kai's arm over Nakoa's shoulder, blood soaking his leg. Bullets pursued them. One struck the rock beside Nakoa's head, showering him with stone fragments. Another tore through his sleeve, leaving a line of red. But he kept moving, kept dragging Kai towards safety. They reached the base of the trail. Nakoa practically threw Kai onto the path, then turned to face the oncoming soldiers. His rifle was empty. He drew his knife, that curved blade that had cut Talasi's bonds what felt like a lifetime ago, and stood his ground. "Climb!" he shouted up at Kai. "Climb, and do not stop!" 5 soldiers advanced on him, their rifles pointed at his chest. An officer stepped forward, a tall man with a thick mustache and cold eyes. "Nakoa Steelhand," the officer said, "also known as the Desert Ghost. You are wanted for murder, theft, and aiding escaped prisoners. Surrender and you will be given a trial." Nakoa laughed, a harsh sound without humor. "A trial? How civilized. Will it be before or after you hang me? That depends on you," the officer said. "Tell us where the others are going. Give us their route. Make this easy and maybe you live long enough to see a courtroom." "I have a better offer," Nakoa replied. "You let my people go. Let them climb that trail and disappear into the desert. Do that, and I will come with you quietly." The officer considered this. "And if I refuse, then you will have to take me. And I promise you, at least 3 of your men will die before you do. Maybe more. Maybe you—" Nakoa's grip tightened on his knife. "Is catching a few refugees worth that price?" Above on the trail, Talasi was screaming his name, trying to climb back down. Yana and others held her back, their hands like iron despite her struggles. She could see what was happening, could see Nakoa sacrificing himself, and rage and grief and love all mixed together in her chest until she could not breathe. The officer looked at Nakoa, then at his men, then at the trail where dozens of people were escaping. He was calculating odds, weighing costs. Finally he nodded. "Lower your weapons," he ordered his men. Several protested, but he silenced them with a gesture. "We have what we came for." The Desert Ghost himself. "The territorial governor will be pleased." He looked at Nakoa. "Drop the knife. Come quietly." "And your people go free?" Nakoa hesitated, his eyes traveling up the trail to where Talasi fought against the arms holding her. Their gazes met across the distance. She saw in his face a goodbye, a final gift, a choice made with clear eyes and no regrets. He mouthed words she could not hear, but understood in her soul. "Live free." Then he dropped the knife. Soldiers rushed forward, forcing him to his knees, binding his wrists with heavy chains. The officer gestured toward the trail. "Go," he called up. "Take your people and disappear. But know this, if I ever see any of you again, the deal is void." On the trail, people were pulling Talasi away, dragging her toward the rim. She fought them every step, her voice raw from screaming Nakoa's name. But they were stronger, more numerous, and they would not let her throw away the freedom he had just bought with his life. As they crested the rim, and the canyon disappeared behind them, Talasi caught one last glimpse of Nakoa being marched toward the canyon entrance, his head high, his back straight, unbroken even in chains. Then he was gone. The survivors walked for 2 days through the harshest terrain they could find, making their trail impossible to follow. They walked until exhaustion claimed them, until even the children stopped crying from sheer fatigue. They walked until they reached a place Nakoa had told them about, a hidden valley with water and grass, where they could rest and regroup. 23 people had escaped the canyon. More than 30 had died or been captured. The group that had been a community was now just fragments, survivors bound by shared trauma and uncertain futures. That first night in the hidden valley, they built a fire and sat around it in silence. There were no words for what they had lost, no easy comfort to offer. Kai's leg had been treated by Yana, but he would walk with a limp forever. Rosa had taken a bullet through her shoulder, but would live. Others bore wounds less visible, but equally deep. Talasi sat apart from the others, staring into the darkness beyond the firelight. She had not spoken since leaving the canyon, had not eaten or slept. She simply sat, her hands in her lap, her face empty of everything except the weight of loss. Yana lowered herself carefully beside her. For a long time, the older woman said nothing. Then quietly she spoke. "He saved us all. You know that..." Talasi's voice when it came was hollow. "He should have let me stay. I could have fought beside him, and you would have died beside him. Is that what you wanted? Better than this. Better than living while he..." Her voice broke. She pressed her hands to her face, but no tears came. She was beyond tears. "He chose this," Yana said gently. "Not because he wanted to die, but because he wanted us to live. Wanted you to live, to throw that away, to waste the freedom he bought for you, would dishonor his choice." "I do not know how to do this without him," Talasi whispered. "None of us do. But we will learn, together." Yana placed a weathered hand over Talasi's. "He saw something in you from the very beginning. Strength, courage, the will to survive. He saw a fighter, even when you were in chains. Do not prove him wrong now." The words settled into Talasi, like seeds in fertile ground. She sat with them, let them take root. Slowly, over the following days and weeks, she began to rejoin the living. The group stayed in the hidden valley for a month, healing and making plans. They could not remain together. Too many people, too easy to track. So they divided into smaller groups, each taking different paths, each seeking their own version of freedom. Some went south into Mexico. Others headed east to try their luck in different territories. A few, the very young or very old, decided to surrender to the authorities and hope for mercy they probably would not receive. Talasi chose to go north with Yana, Rosa, and 6 others. They would head into the deep wilderness, into Apache lands where the army rarely ventured. They would find a place so remote that no one would bother looking for them. And there they would build something new. On the day they left the valley, Talasi stood for a moment on the ridge overlooking the camp. She thought about Nakoa, about the man who had freed her from chains and taught her what it meant to choose her own path. She thought about his hands, gentle despite their strength, about his voice, quiet but commanding, about his eyes, which had seen her as human when others saw only property. She pulled from her pocket something she had carried since the canyon, Nakoa's knife. She had found it lying where he had dropped it, and she had taken it without telling anyone. Now she held it up to the light, watching the blade gleam. On the handle, worn smooth by years of use, she could see where his hands had gripped it. She could almost feel the warmth of him still lingering in the leather wrap. "I will live free," she promised the empty air. "Like you wanted? I will build something good, and I will never forget what you gave me." Then she sheathed the knife at her hip and turned north, toward the mountains, toward the future. 6 months later, in a valley so remote it appeared on no maps, a small settlement began to take shape. Simple structures at first, just canvas and wood, but solid, permanent, built by people who had decided to stop running. Talasi had become the settlement's healer, respected and sought after. Her skill with medicine had saved lives through a harsh winter. Her calm strength had helped resolve disputes. She had proven herself not just a survivor, but a leader. One morning in early spring, a rider approached the settlement. The guards called out a warning, hands moving to weapons. But as the figure drew closer, they recognized him. Kai, still limping but alive, his face split in a wide grin, and beside him, moving slowly but under his own power, was Nakoa. Talasi heard the commotion and came running. She stopped when she saw him, certain she was dreaming. But dreams did not have this much detail. Dreams did not show the new scars on his face, the way he favored his left side, the exhaustion in his eyes. Dreams were not this real. Nakoa slid from his horse and stood, swaying slightly. Their eyes met across the distance. Then Talasi was running, her feet barely touching the ground. She crashed into him with enough force to make him grunt, but his arms came around her immediately, holding her tight. She buried her face in his chest and felt him trembling, felt his heart beating strong and steady. "You are alive," she said, the words muffled against his shirt. "How they had you in chains. I saw them take you." "Kai came back," Nakoa said, his voice rough from disuse. "Crazy fool rode into the fort at night. Caused enough chaos that I could escape during the confusion. We have been running ever since, following rumors and whispers, trying to find you." She pulled back to look at his face, touching his cheek gently, assuring herself he was real. "You should have stayed gone. You could have been killed." "I made you a promise," Nakoa said. "On that ridge, remember? I said I wanted to build something with you. I keep my promises." Talasi laughed then, a sound that was half sob, half pure joy. She kissed him, not caring who was watching, not caring about anything except that he was here, alive. And they had both survived to find each other again. When they finally pulled apart, Nakoa looked around at the settlement, at the structures being built, at the people gathering to welcome him. He smiled, really smiled, for the first time in longer than he could remember. "You did it," he said. "You built a home." "We built it," Talasi corrected. "All of us, together, and now you are here to help us finish." That evening the entire settlement gathered for a feast. They roasted meat and shared stories. Children played while adults talked and laughed. For one night, the fear and pain of the past year faded, replaced by something simpler and more precious: hope. Nakoa and Talasi sat together watching the fire, their hands intertwined. The scars they both carried, visible and invisible, would never fully heal. But scars were proof of survival, proof that they had endured and overcome. "What do we do now?" Talasi asked quietly. "Now," Nakoa said, looking at her with eyes full of certainty, "we live. We build. We make this place into something that cannot be taken away. We teach the children that freedom is not given. It is earned and defended. We show the world that people like us, people they tried to break and sell and destroy, we are stronger than they ever imagined. And if they come for us again, then we fight. But this time we fight for something worth dying for. We fight for home." Talasi leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the quiet strength that had saved her life and given her purpose. Around them, their people, their family, continued to celebrate. And in the firelight, in the heart of the wilderness, in a place carved out by determination and sacrifice, something impossible had been achieved. Freedom, true freedom, not granted by papers or laws, but claimed by courage. Years later, when travelers told stories of a hidden settlement in the northern wilderness, a place where people of all backgrounds lived together in peace, where no one was owned and everyone was free, most dismissed it as legend. But legends, like the people who inspired them, had a way of surviving long after those who doubted them had turned to dust. And in that hidden valley, life continued. Children grew, crops were planted and harvested, love flourished, and two people who had once stood on an auction block and a canyon rim, separated by chains and duty, now stood together, building a future one day at a time. The story of Talasi Morningdew and Nakoa Steelhand became the foundation story of their people, told around fires for generations. Not a tale of perfect heroes, but of imperfect people who chose courage over comfort, who chose each other over safety, who chose freedom over everything. And in the end, that choice made all the difference. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.